Okay everyone, so we're back with another episode of LabHorrorTory, and this week I decided to tackle the famed aquatic beast, the mermaid, or Siren. So, funny story, this was supposed to be released last month as part of Mermaid, and well, life admittedly got in the way for me, so you're now getting this at the beginning of June. Very cool. So, with that embarrassing reveal out of the way, let's dive into our first fun fact. So the first known literary writings of the Siren as a mermaid appeared in the Liber Monstrorum, which is a late 7th or early 8th century Anglo-Latin catalogue of marvelous creatures and figures. These writings align more closely with the description we're all accustomed to. They be sea girls with the upper body of a maiden, with the scaly fishtail in the image of Poseidon himself. Whoa, sorry, I don't know what came over me there. But funny enough, this was not only the depiction of the siren. In fact, in ancient Greek mythology, a siren is a hybrid creature with the body of a bird instead of a fish, and the head of a human. It wasn't until we get closer to the Hellenistic period, where images of sirens take on the form of the more recognizable half-human fish hybrid. So for all you vampire fans out there, if you'd like to see a really hilarious iteration of this design, look no further than the show What We Do in the Shadows. If you know, you know. So now back to the sculpture. You can see that I've now worked out the silhouette of the design, and are now starting to figure out some of the detailed or secondary forms. I really struggled in particular with the face of this character, fully aware of how important it was to nail down. With that came some frustration at the expense of my computer and ZBrush as a software package itself. There were some harsh words about each other's upbringing, some profanity, but eventually we kissed and made up and all is well. Sorry I drifted off there, but let's jump back into some fun facts. So for those that aren't familiar with the tales of the Siren, firstly, read a book. Secondly, let me give you the short and messy version. It be a tale of sailors and mythology, hearing the song of a beautiful woman in the mist, beckoning them to join her, thus plunging themselves into the briny depths and most foul death. Hark! Whoa. Sorry, that must be my inner fishing town heritage coming out of me again. I don't know what's coming over me on this episode, but bear with me. So now that you're all caught up on some siren lore, let's talk about how humans fought against these beautiful sea creatures. In mythology, one such chap was named Odysseus, who was curious about hearing the siren's fabled song, but knew of its dangers. Therefore, he decided to experiment, so he ordered his crew to plug their ears with beeswax and tie him to the mast of his ship. He ordered his men to leave him tied tightly to the mast, and no matter how much he might beg or plead, to never let him free of his bindings. And so they didn't. When he heard the deadly serenade of the siren, he ordered the crew to untie him. But that just made them bind him tighter. Now that's loyalty. Or perhaps maybe they just enjoyed punishing their boss, who knows. Odysseus and his crew managed to survive their encounter with the deadly siren and lived to tell the tale. The effects of this event had bigger ramifications than expected, because it's also said in mythology that should the siren song fail to lure in its prey, the creature must then plunge itself to its own death in the ocean, giving itself back to the sea. So, way to go Odysseus for wanting to hear the most infamous diss track in history, only to slay a beast in the process. And to think, she just wanted to get signed to a label and share her mixtape. For shame. So now that you got a background on the siren, let's jump back into my design. You can see that a lot of the finer detailed wrinkled forms and gills and scales are starting to take shape now. The cowl piece and subsequent neck bracing of my design took inspiration from Dracula, or Countess Elizabeth Bathory. This was intentional as the main point of inspiration for my creature came from our own deep sea, most specifically the vampire squid. Despite its name, this creature is quite docile and not particularly dangerous, but screw it. We all know everything else in the deep sea is straight up gangsta, so I rolled with it anyway, because I loved its vibrant color scheme, huge eyes, and silhouette. As you can see in my original concept, I took some liberties with the Siren, making it a predominantly deep-sea beast with a vampiric dancer's aesthetic rather than a songstress. The hooped skirt and coiled mass of tentacles emanate bioluminescent light, creating a dance of lights which cause weary sailors to fall under its hypnotic trance, giving themselves to the depths and the Siren's dance of lights. Ooh, pretty tentacles. Oof. Okay, I almost fell into a trance there myself. Got a little distracted by my own riveting storytelling, I guess. Please keep your hentai jokes to yourself, and you know who you are. Alright, so let's move into our final fun facts of the episode. So, mermaids tend to get glamorized in the media as beautiful, unobtainable sex symbols of the deep. They're basically unicorns of the ocean. Now, I'm not saying unicorns are sexy, I'm just making a comparison. You get what I mean. What I'd like to do instead is highlight the darker history of the creature, because in different cultures, it tends to take on a more malevolent, and dare I say, more interesting form. Let's first start with Japan, where the Ningyo took on the form of mostly fish with a human head. Creepy, right? These creatures were, though horrifying in appearance, were heavily sought after because it was said that eating the flesh of the Ningyo granted eternal youth or immortality. Now let's jump over to Ireland, shall we? Where we talk about the Selkie. In Celtic mythology, these shapeshifters were able to take on the form of humans and seals at will by shedding and putting on their seal skin, like they were just getting ready for some aquatic version of the Met Gala or something. These creatures symbolize the transformative and fluid nature of identity and our deep connection with nature. How progressive and beautiful. So on that note, I did promise to scare you, so let's move on over to eastern parts of Europe, shall we? The Rusalka are siren-like creatures of Slavic mythology and folklore who are often depicted as very dangerous to humans. It is said that women who were the byproduct of abusive or unhappy marriages, jilted lovers and so on, that would later drown themselves or by the means of their violent, abusive partners in nearby lakes, were then recreated or resurrected into these mermaid-like monstrosities of vengeance. They are unclean, angry spirits forced to live out their lives as Rusalka, and gosh darn it, they'll drown as many folks as they could to enact righteous vengeance. Ah, hath no fury like a woman scorned, eh? Back to the sculpture. You can now see that we are moving towards the final stages of the design and prep for the post-production stage of my workflow. I used a tool in ZBrush called Z-Spheres to create the fishtail and tentacles while using various masking techniques to make the fins and smaller details. And with the refinement stage complete, throwing on some alpha stencils and skin pores were all that's left to call this done. Though I did struggle a bit, I did wind up having a blast making this monster for y'all. I especially loved the painting process, which you can see in a bonus video I've created for our upcoming Patreon page. I'll be releasing these bonus videos as extra content to patrons of our higher tiers. More info to come on that in later videos, so stay tuned to our YouTube page. Which reminds me, if you'd like watching this or hearing my bad jokes and stories, feel free to click that like button and subscribe for more content. Okay, with the shameless plugs out of the way, it's that time again, folks. Now that the monster sculpture is all cooked and ready to go, let's head on over to the lab to see it come to life. And there we have it. A fine lady if I ever saw one myself. The Abyssal Siren is now 3D printed and complete, ready for display on my shelf. You can now own this creature for yourself by heading on over to our brand new My Mini Factory store, where I'll be posting the STL files for your printing pleasure. You can also find our brand new line of miniatures, the Corrupted Hive, slowly getting unveiled in the store if you need some extra beasts or monsters to add to your latest campaign or tabletop adventure. And our last announcement of the day, I want to give a special shout out to my fellow Maelstrom Maker and co-owner of our business, Matt Goodmanson, for starting up his new show, Matt Makes Monsters. In his show, he walks through the process of digital painting and concept art, where you get to see the 2D side of the process. It's a fantastic show, so please check it out on our channel if you like this kind of content. As always, it was an absolute pleasure hanging out with all of you and sharing my creative process. Please stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to dive into the growing bestiary of the LabHorrorTory.